Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons. Today's the 23rd day of VEDA, it's a Saturday, and it's time for another Shower Thought Saturday where I have a deep thought of, okay, let's not delude ourselves here. It's obvious what I'm going to be talking about, plus I said I'd talk about this anyway, so this is essentially my next day review of, well, what are we calling this one? Je suis Romania, Silence Gate, Stand with Anton 2K16, Justice for Ovidiu, We Won't Bucharest. Well, whatever the appropriate hashtag is, for those who weren't aware, yesterday it was made public by the EBU that Romania's national broadcaster TVR has not only been excluded from this year's Eurovision, but just straight up kicked out of the EBU in general, owing to several years of mounting debts. Now, if I'd been a good little boy, I would have looked up beforehand exactly what those debts are equivalent to, but I'll put them on screen now. All I know for certain is that they're equivalent to 16 million Swiss francs. I only know it in francs because the EBU is based in Geneva. So, I mean, to be fair, I used to think that Geneva was in South America, so the point is the EBU is Swiss and they owe them a lot of Swiss money. But yes, people haven't taken too kindly to this news, and understandably so, because an entire country has been kicked out of Eurovision. Although, as people are rather keen to not pay attention to, not just Eurovision, but the Broadcasting Union as a whole, which means that TVR do not own the rights to broadcast the contest, to vote in the contest, to send an act to the contest, nor are they eligible to broadcast anything else within the Eurovision network. So that means no junior Eurovision, no young dancers, no young musicians, none of the other, no news coverage, no sporting events, none of the other stuff that the Eurovision network supplies, because they've been kicked out of the Broadcasting Union. As I said, a lot of people are upset by this, because it's an entire country being excluded from the Broadcasting Union. I suppose, to the naysayers, it must be a huge kick in the teeth that Australia's in but Romania's out, but let's not get into that whole hornet's nest. As far as I've seen, people are very, very eager to demonise Jon Ola Sand for this decision, the executive supervisor of the EBU, but I'm tempted to say that there's more to this story, and so I'm going to look at both sides of this, because it is very much a problem of two halves. But before I go into any of that, I will begin by saying that within all of this, Ovidiu Anton, the artist who had been chosen to represent Romania, him and his delegation are not at fault. They are the victims and only the victims in this situation. They haven't done anything to incur the wrath of the almighty Björkman Ola Sand unit. But beyond that, I do encourage you lovely people to think about this carefully, because the EBU wouldn't just do this without any reason. So let's have a look at both sides of the thing here. We'll start with the more popular way of looking at things, which essentially says, oh, it's entirely the EBU's fault and TVR are completely innocent. So we'll begin from that perspective. What has the EBU done badly about all this? Well, the chief problem here is why the 20th of April? Because at some point, I don't know how far in advance this was decided, but at some point, some time ago, the EBU gave TVR an ultimatum that they should clear their debts before or as of either the 20th or the 22nd of April 2016. And if they didn't do that, then they would face exclusion from the Broadcasting Union, and that's what's been done. So, as a corporation, that makes sense. But why April? That seems like a really, really stupid date to set for them to clear their debt. Perhaps it makes sense to do with financial quarters and stuff, but this is the European Broadcasting Union. Why would you set the deadline to be at the end of national final season, but 3 weeks before the start of the contest? That seems really dumb, because, as we've seen, TVR has been insistent on sending Romanian acts to the contest for as long as they can get away with. And evidently, the patterns show Romania was going to send an act to this year's song contest no matter what, as long as the EBU let them think that they'd be allowed to get away with it. And so they did. And then they were told to fuck off because they hadn't cleared the debts. So that seems like a really stupid place to put the deadline for them to clear their debts. Either do it at the start of national final season so they don't even have to go through hosting this extravagant national final format and expensive promotional tours and shit, or wait until they've competed the contest and the contest is over, and then set the deadline so that they can have one last contest before it's all over. You can't just have it in the middle because, as I've said, they've paid for the national final, they've paid for promotional tours. Ovidiu Anton has been to at least 2, if not more, of the pre-show event promotion things. I don't remember which ones, but the likes of Eurovision in concert and the pre-party in Israel, Riga, London, one or two of those anyway. That costs money. And they're already in debt. why would you lead them on like that? That said, in the EBU's defense, as they've pointed out, okay, I'm probably going to get shot down for saying this, but like I said, there is more than one side to this story. So, in the EBU's defense, first of all, the deadline may have had something to do with financial quarters. I don't know, I'm not an expert. But, as they've clearly explained, no one at the Broadcasting Union wanted to do this. They didn't want to have to kick Romania out. It's just that because the EBU is a not-for-profit organisation, and because they host stuff like Eurovision and all these other events and coverage and whatever, they need the input of their member broadcasters, and if one broadcaster isn't pulling their weight, then it's not sustainable for them to have this Broadcasting Union and not have every broadcaster pay a bit in. Think of it like this. If you're going out for dinner with several of your friends, and you all have a rather nice 5-course dinner for whatever reason, and then you split the bill, but you can only afford to pay your chunk of the bill, and one of your friends falls short, no one can afford to cover them, and so you can't afford the thing that you've just done. Maybe that was a bad way of wording that analogy, but you see what I mean. The idea is, if you can only pay your chunk of the bill, and one other person can't foot their part of the bill, then, as a collective, you can't afford it. So, the simple solution there would be to cut out the one who can't afford, so that they won't be costing that money that they can't afford in the first place. They won't be incurring the expenses that their payment would have to cover. So, as I said, as a corporation, as a company, it makes sense that they kick Romania out. And it's not as if it's been done without warning, because they set I agree that the date that they set the deadline for is stupid. It should either be before the contest or after, not immediately before. But this deadline has been set in place for quite some time, longer than we as a public have known. So it's not as if Romania didn't know they had this sword of Damocles hanging above them this entire time, that they had to clear these debts. Bearing in mind, these have been building up since at least 2010. And they've just been sitting there. These debts have been building up, and they've gone completely unaddressed since then. So they knew that their time was limited anyway. So let's look at the other side of the coin. What has TVR done wrong here? Because they're not completely innocent. I know that they may not be the richest broadcaster out there, but they're not completely free of blame in the situation. For one, as I said, they've known this entire time that they have these mounting debts, and yet they've still been really pushing their luck, really taking advantage almost of the EBU's generosity, because they've had these mounting debts since at least 2010, but the EBU has had the grace to let them continue taking part in Eurovision with the asterisk that they pay off their debts by April of this year, which they haven't done. And so, in that regard, it feels like they're taking advantage of that generosity. Surely, knowing that they have that deadline coming up in the 2016 Eurovision season, and knowing that they have no way or no intention or whatever of paying those debts off, surely knowing that their contract or whatever it is will expire before the 2016 contest, surely then that would say to them, right, we're probably going to get kicked out, let's not even bother trying to take part this year because we're probably going to get kicked out and then this will happen. And so, to that end, if they knew, and they will have known, that this was going to happen, or that this was even a possibility of happening for that matter, they shouldn't have hosted, they shouldn't have tried to take part in the first place. And so, Ovidiu and his team, it seems like they've been led on by TVR. Like, TVR's just been standing back and saying, oh no, everything's completely fine, don't worry about it. But in actuality, they're backstage thinking, shit, we can't afford to pay these debts, we're gonna get kicked out. And then they got kicked out and then everyone was sad. So there's a lack of foresight there, certainly. And I suppose you could say, well, maybe they're too poor to pay it off. In which case, I'd say, well, yes, but then that just feeds back into they knew they wouldn't be able to clear the debts, so why did they go to the expense of hosting a national final, getting into more debts in the first place, doing all these promotional tours and stuff, and leading an artist on into believing that he would go on to represent his country at Eurovision, when they knew that this was not only a distinct possibility, but almost a guaranteed eventuality. And it's not as if the two parties haven't tried to sort something out here. The EBU and TVR have made efforts on their own part. TVR have been persisting with their Eurovision formula. They've been trying to fight for it, and I think they have been trying to talk to the Romanian government to try and get them to subsidize, or I've heard the word insolvency bandied about a bit, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but they have been trying for what it's worth. And the EBU, like I said, set this deadline really far in advance, gave them plenty of grace opportunities to take part in Eurovision in the intervening time, and they've attempted on several occasions to contact TVR and say, yo, the deadline's coming up, and then, yo, the deadline is really coming up, And then, seriously TVR, we kind of need this money or we're going to have to kick you out, and we don't want to do that because there'll be a public shitstorm. We don't want you to leave. You don't want to leave. Ovidiu Anton doesn't want you to leave. Please! And every single one of these messages has just gone completely ignored by the broadcaster, or at the very least, that's what it sounds like from the media that I've experienced. So overall, I want to reiterate, no one party carries all of the blame here. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances where everyone involved, apart from Ovidiu and his crew, haven't really done the best that they could to resolve this situation. The EBU, bad timing, and it seems tactless the way they went about it, but it makes sense for them. And TVR knew that they were in a bad situation, but they kept trying, they kept pressing their luck anyway. So no one person is all to blame here, Jan Ola Sand isn't Hitler too for kicking them out, and even then, I don't even know if that was his decision in the first place. It's not sustainable for them to keep giving Romania these passes to keep taking part while their debts build up and up and up. As a person, my heart really does go out to Ovidiu Anton and his people, because it would be nice to see some symphonic rock in Eurovision. To me, it still doesn't sound like a symphonic rock song. It sounds like a symphonic song, but not symphonic rock. I'm not going to tell him what genre his song is, because he knew what he was doing, and I really admire his confidence, and he's stayed very strong through this, because I agree with his Facebook post, it is unfair. But we should bear in mind, he's been let down by the EBU and TVR. TVR for not clearing their debts and then pretending that everything was okay, and the EBU for setting the deadline at such a weird point in time. So, once again, I do encourage you lovely people to think about this rationally. Don't just go heckling Jan Ola Sand because, why did you kick Romania out? Because there is reasoning behind it. Yes, it was poorly handled, but there was no choice in the matter. It had to be done, otherwise those debts would have drastic implications for the rest of the broadcasting union, which would then be passed on to a load of its other members, if not all of its other members for that matter, bearing in mind a lot of its current members aren't in the best financial situation as it is. Bosnia and Herzegovina haven't been in Eurovision for the past couple of years prior to this one because they've been having financing troubles. Croatia and Bulgaria, similar problems. So let's just remember in all this, it's not that some greedy fat cat behind the scenes is saying, yes, we'll screw over the human lives because money, money, money. There's no one here thinking like that. It's just a case of there are these debts that are outstanding, and TVR have been well aware of them and done nothing about them. And whether that's their own fault or not, what is their fault is pretending that everything will be okay and leading an artist on, in fact, leading all of the national finalists on for that matter, and the whole public as well, because it's led to this disappointment. So, just one last reiteration, no one party is completely at fault here. I do feel for the broadcasting union and for TVR because they've both been wronged, but they've also both wronged each other. It's not a simple case of us versus them. No one's fully in the right here, apart from Ovidiu Anton and his people, because he didn't know and there's nothing he could have done about it. So, just of the two main parties involved here, of TVR and the EBU, no one's fully right and no one's fully wrong. So, let's just not be as hateful about this, because it makes more sense to try and work together to find a solution for it than it does to just spew hate and vitriol and just leave it at that. I've seen suggestions that perhaps Moment of Silence should be performed as an interval act in the grand final. I would say, I would lean more towards having perform it in the second semi-final, because there's no guarantee he would have qualified, and so to say, you were kicked out, so just come and be an automatic finalist, but without the competing, that seems a little bit hasty, but I do agree he should participate as an interval act if possible, because clearly they've planned the staging, they've got everything organised, so it would be dickish to just tell him to go home and just... how much of a kick in the teeth would it be to have Ovidiu Anton win the national final, and then have this happen, and then say, no, you're going to have to go home, to a home in Romania which can't receive the contest in the first place? That would be really, really harsh. So I think he should be allowed to at least perform at the contest. Not within the running order, certainly as an interval act. I don't know. I'm just saying... Just one last clarification. This isn't black and white. There are several shades of grey involved, and it's not as cut and dried as you might think. So, on that note, I will say that I have been and will continue to be Tessellating Hexagons. And if you don't have anything nice to say, then just take a moment of silence instead.